Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bytes of Brilliance, Digital Boardroom Insights. I'm your host, Carsten Kraus, and today we're diving deep into the fascinating intersection of digital transformation and enterprise architecture. Thank you for joining us. And today, I am particularly excited to introduce today's special guest, Grant Ecker. Not only is he the VP and Chief Architect and executive coach at Danaher, but he's also the co-founder and chairman of the board of the Chief Architect Forum, an esteemed organization that I'm also part of. Grant, it's an absolute honor to have you here. Welcome to the show.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me, Carsten.
Awesome. I figured, what I usually do in my podcast, I kind of talk about your journey. So maybe we start at the beginning. How did you start your journey in the technology sector? What led you to your current role at Danaher?
Man, it's kind of a funny story. I grew up with technology. I just couldn't get away from this stuff. My mom used to tell me I had to get out of my computer world and move in with the rest of society. And I think we've all seen the exact opposite has happened. From programming calculators and middle school and elementary schools all the way up, it's been a passion. So I first did my first real technology job as a high school junior as an intern at a company called WhamNet that was later purchased by MCI WorldCom. And I produced my first IT product that as a student. I was going to WashU, but my brother was going to Stanford, and he was taking medical classes and the embryology of a fetus, and it was really hard to picture it all. So I was a Flash expert back in the day, and he and I worked with the embryology department at Stanford to create a product over the summer that ended up being included in the back of the CDs of that textbook. And then coming out of college and moving into the real world, I went to General Mills first. I had big dreams of going to California and doing some of that .com era work, but ultimately, as I looked at the different opportunities, I liked some of the classic businesses that didn't have IT as their foundation. So I grew up in the technical ranks, doing project and program art management, as well as kind of the solution architecture for some of the more interesting problems that we're seeing at General Mills. Eventually growing into management, doing an MBA, and then as my scope grew, and I ended up in the collaboration space, that got Lowe's attention, and they called me down to North Carolina to help them build out their collaboration platform. I did that for a while, stabilized it, moved into HR, where I helped to reorganize IT for a new CIO. And from my eagle eye of the org chart, I was able to go after the job I'd always wanted, which was architecture. So then it started a rinse and repeat journey for me of helping proactive and kind of small central architecture teams build a federated engagement across the organization and start to build into the processes of the company, the PMO, the strategy and planning, the application portfolio management and lifecycle management. And I've done that kind of in a rinse repeat at different elevations. Lowe's kind of as the practice leader, but well within the ranks of architecture. At Medtronic, I was the architect leader for US and Americas and grew into be their chief architect over my 5 years there back in Minnesota. And Then I moved to Chicago, where I helped Walgreens unify their architecture practice across both sides of the pond, Boots in the UK and the Walgreens team in the US.
Hmm.
And as they were thinking about splitting off and selling that company, and I had strong leaders in both areas, I wanted to progress the leader at Walgreens to take my role. And I was looking for an opportunity kind of up or out at Walgreens, and ended up finding an amazing opportunity at Danaher, which is a company no one's heard of that does life sciences, and they're kind of like a conglomerate of a lot of individual life sciences businesses. So the interesting challenge at Danaher is really around trying to get these different operating companies to find their common ground and find common leverage, which has been really exciting because there hadn't been much of that work done before I arrived. So finding these opportunities is kind of like a big blue ocean opportunity. So a little longer answer, Karsten, but that's the journey.
Yeah, I think the opportunities are endless, leveraging technology to future-proof organizations. And often, I've seen also, we share that in common, right? We're both enterprise architects, and I always took that with me to, the individual roles that I worked in. So, obviously enterprise architecture is becoming more pivotal in landscapes of digital transformation. Companies are, COVID has shown us, you can't run your organization without the underlying technology, but also innovation. Can you shed a light on the importance and significance of enterprise architecture teams helping, build out the technology roadmap?
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's the meat and potatoes of architecture we all think about around, okay, what do we have? Where do we want to go? And mapping that, current state to future state. And that's important work, but it's really important that it sits in context with the change we're trying to drive for the broader organization. That's where you really start to notice the application of this in more than just a tactical, clean your room kind of way, right? It's more about how are we going to plan for the future and how is this going to enable us? So that's where enterprise architecture has a unique role to zoom out. We really need to understand the context of the broader challenge. What is our why, right? What is the reason that we're trying to drive change? What are the outcomes that the business needs? And then we can get into the what, which I just kind of mentioned the outcomes we're trying to drive, but also what are the areas to focus into? As you decompose your vision into imperatives, into objectives, what are the key capabilities that are required to drive those outcomes into realization? And
Mhm.
as you look at that, are we light on people, process, information, technology, even measures? And
Mhm.
that's where we use our business architecture lens, not just for technology, but for the broader business to help figure out, okay, for product and service innovation, we actually have a people gap. We don't
Mhm.
have enough knowledge in AI, and we have to train people on that. Great. Okay. So that's going to be a roadmap item that's right next to the technology of putting in AI platforms that are going to drive that capability. So as we then step into the how, that's where we start to apply our broad vision to the tactical things that we're trying to execute. Wait, you don't want to put in that vision system. We already have a standard vision system that we're going after. Let's make sure we're putting in the technology that's in the roadmap and not deviating.
Mhm.
So it's really important that architecture takes that broad view first and then gets into the detail, because if we try to build from the bottom up, we never quite get there.
Right, right. Yeah, I've seen in the past that it's so pivotal to be the connective tissue across the whole organization, because you have all these good ideas of how to achieve corporate vision, and there might be, other individual departments that share across, and so it's always good to bring people together and create that almost that visibility to the organization. And totally makes sense to me to look at what's the business architecture, what's the vision. You never start with technology, right? You always
Right.
start with what is where's the company going, what is the industry doing, what are some of the trends that are out there, and then you bring that all together. And then you almost have to wear multiple hats, working with program management and other leaders to help prioritize, what makes sense as part of that roadmap. So with all that being said, you're not just an enterprise architect for Danaher, but you're also the co-founder and chairman of the Chief Architect Forum. Could you tell us a little bit more about the forum and what its objectives are?
I would love to. And this is something that's just been a point of passion for me. So really, I've noticed this as an architect leader that most architecture forums become practitioner forums. And it's something that as a leader, I love to see, right? I'd love for there to be places for our experts to collaborate, to share knowledge in their domain. And the practitioners outnumber us. Of course they do, right? And that's by design.
Mhm.
So when we show up to an architect collaboration event, generally the practitioners who outnumber us and also have the most detail are the most vocal. So we take a step back and we really allow those folks to have that conversation. And at the end of it, as the leaders of architecture, we go, well, that was awesome. However, it's really deeper than what I focus on. Let me send my top deputy who's focused on that particular space. And unfortunately, that trend continues over and over again, where that deputy will then send his top subject matter expert. But what happens is also the conversation gets too broad and there starts to lose commonality across the folks that are joining. So the Chief Architect Forum really seeks to address that by really having it just be for the leaders. We don't delegate the seat. You're at a certain altitude of span of leadership that allows us to know we're all in the same kind of altitude of problem solving. And that allows us to really do several things: advocate for the profession, learn from our peers, broaden our network, and develop our talent, which is really our four key goals that we seek to accomplish together. So this started off with just a small group of folks that both I knew, and Paul Price, the CEO of ISA, which is a nonprofit that does architecture certification, training, and a number of outreach efforts. We partnered to create this thing, and it's resonated. So at the current present time, we're around 150 members in around 120 companies. And we've just been meeting quarterly for the past 2 years, but it's all been virtual. And we have our first chance to be together in person this October 5th and 6th. And I'm really excited to see a large number of our members there. And we're also going to connect to the virtual folks as a part of that not everybody could travel across the world to be with us, and we are a global community. So it's been amazing to watch that take shape. And for those of you interested in kind of learning from this group, follow the Chief Architect Forum on LinkedIn. We post the comments from all the Chief Architect members, and it's a great place to engage with Chief Architect on what they're seeing happen in the space.
No, that's great. No, thank you for setting it up. And it's often these grassroots efforts of building up, taking initiative, right, and all in the theme of helping, doing it for the greater good. Similar reason why I started CDO Times, because I wanted to share, knowledge from, experts like yourself and other folks, learning together, right? That's that definitely resonates with me. So maybe, now that we kind of took like the broad overview space, maybe let's come back to Danaher. Is there like a case study that you can share, how Danaher leverages enterprise architecture to advance the digital strategy and agenda?
Absolutely. So I guess what I'd start with is Danaher is, as I mentioned, kind of an assembly of smaller companies that ultimately have been mostly independent. We're very what we call operating company centric at Danaher. So the architecture practices have been focused and developing in each of those companies. So it's really been about at Cytiva, optimizing Cytiva's business model and ensuring the architecture is aligning to that. And Beckman Coulter, Leica Microsystems and Biosystems, et cetera, right? Each of these companies have taken significant steps to build out their architecture practices. And that was long before I ever joined. So I just joined in the last 9 months. And what I've learned in coming together with this group is there's a lot of really strong talent in our organizations, and they've done a lot of great work. The thing that I get this cool opportunity to do is bring all these groups together and start to figure out who's got the best architecture definition document? Who's got the best process for review? Who's got the best road mapping template? And
Mhm.
put that stuff in the middle and then try to make them available as standard work and best practices. And then also create visibility across these different organizations. That's some of the initial value we were able to create right away is who else working on AI? And we get hand raisers and we started to understand and codify the different use cases that were taking shape and then bring people from opco to opco into each other's conversations to help incubate the learning and to make it easier to deploy the next one. So harmonizing process, harmonizing our learning, and also really starting to build an enterprise portfolio are some of the things that are initially the focus. But part of the fun is the focus evolves. And it's such a blue ocean space because
Mhm.
they didn't have architecture at that corporate layer that I get to meet with the CIOs on a regular basis and make sure that our North Star that we're tracking towards continues to be the most resonant and important
Mhm.
areas to focus on across the varied architecture discipline, right? We can go this, to the NAT level detail, or we can be zooming out to transformations. So getting
Right.
their pulse has been absolutely critical in sort of building the initial momentum of this practice.
Yeah. I think that's relevant for so many organizations. You could have a scenario where, I was facing that at Anheuser-Busch, where I was in charge of enterprise architecture. And I took the initiative to create a global architecture practice where we were sharing across the different regions and zones. And then, more in your type of scenario where you have, I guess, for lack of terms, it's kind of like a holding organization that kind of coordinates between the different parts of the individual companies and sharing best practice. And then even for companies that, let's say you're a small organization or an individual organization, but can team up in like an architecture forum, or you could start your own group, right, to share things across. I think I was part of a forum for that was led by Coca-Cola for all consumer products, where they were pulling in expertise from different companies that they were working with or from thought leaders. So there's all these different opportunities to learn from each other, and I think that's something that we should all do. Um, Kind of switching topics a little bit. We talked a little already about some of the new technologies. What do you see are some of the emerging trends, especially in enterprise architecture, that should be on the radar of C-level executives? And what are some maybe some challenges that we should be prepared to tackle with that respect?
Well, I find it fascinating to have that question as I'm talking to the leader of CDO Times, and right behind you is scrolling marquees of the kinds of themes we need to be watching, right? So, this is very much your expertise and something that I think we all learn from as we follow you on LinkedIn. Um, I think that, of course, AI is a trend we have to be stepping into, but I think it's not just the what of it, it's the how. How should IT help a business use AI and enable their business with AI? I think for us, it's not about understanding every possible use of AI and being in front of it and getting, okay, coast is clear, business, come on in, right? I think the idea that we would be able to innovate at the speed the business needs and understand every nuance of use cases and prioritize appropriately is a foolhardy proposition. Instead, I think we, as the kind of the technology part of the organization, need to be thinking about how do we, at the macro level, keep people safe? How do we give people the spaces to experiment and learn in SaaS and PaaS and in IaaS, infrastructure as a service, right? Where you're rolling your own AI, perhaps using some of the open models like Llama and Alpaca, right? Or in some of the public spaces where you might be using a service that offers AI. What are the things that we have to be looking out for? And I'll tell you what those things are, for example. I think it's super important that we aren't training an external knowledge graph without our awareness. If our associates are in an environment where they're building IP, where they're putting a competitive intelligence into the AI tooling to try to get a way to optimize where we should go left or right. And that AI is actually kind of a leaky bucket, and all of the insights in the form of the questions or in the form of the IP we're sharing with it are actually teaching in a learning module that we don't own.
Hmm.
That's a huge risk. That's a risk everyone can get on board with, right?
Yeah.
So I think part of IT's role is helping to clarify what are the vendors that have been shown to create a safe environment where that learning remains a protected part of the company's IP. It's
Hmm.
secured like that, it's protected like that, there isn't vendor access, et cetera, right?
Right.
And then there's a second space to this, which is really around AI for the greater good.
Hmm.
Like if we're going to train our AI, a vendor's AI, on how to prevent cyber attacks, because it learns from ones that have hit our organization and other organizations to make the entire perimeter stronger, why wouldn't we want to participate in that? Of course we would.
Right.
So, like, I think that kind of creating some of those rough like areas of value and bringing the business into these conversations and curating some of the innovation to bring connect them with each other
Hmm.
are some of the spaces that we can really dig in. I went a little deep on AI because that's what's big on people's mind,
It always happens.
right? But it's not the only thing to focus on.
Right.
Like that, there's a ton of innovation happening in this space. I think automation is one of the key things we can provide the business, and as IT, and it has been for
Hmm.
quite some time. So, whether it's RPA tools or helping to align the best SaaS products out there to emerging business needs, some of those meat and potatoes parts of our job are just as important today as they've ever been. Um, and I guess the other thing I would look at is the shifting in cloud, right? We're seeing super cloud, we're seeing multi-cloud, we're seeing folks even reversing the trend of moving from data center to cloud back to data center when the promises of the promised land maybe didn't land quite as well as we
Yeah, I
thought.
might need some FinOps there, right?
Right. That's my recommendation is optimize before you transform. Don't move to the cloud before you've optimized. And once you're there, deploy the tools that are designed to make that a cost-effective environment. It doesn't happen by itself. You have to deploy some FinOps. Don't go
Hmm.
backwards,
Hmm.
right? Invest to clean it up. But I think that there's some really important work we can do as architects to help the business be successful in these transformations by outlining these trends, how to apply them,
Hmm.
and getting their eye off the shiny object to the real hard work we need to do so when we move to the cloud it's a good experience that lowers costs and delivers on the value that's been promised.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what would you add, Karsten? Again, this is your space. Like what have you seen out in the market we need to be paying attention to?
I think there's a lot of technologies that enable great customer experiences. So, we also delve a lot into digital experience platforms. How do you connect the dots? Technologies enable you to have the foundation for innovation, which is, integration. You have your data strategy, being able to process all the data across the board. And then, there's some more things that are a little further out there, and there might be industry specific, right? Where you can use artificial intelligence to come up with new products, optimize your supply chain, blockchain technology, the ugly duckling around the corner, kind of, is coming back and delivering value. And so, there's, and then you have quantum computing and other things to watch out for. But, that's a kind of in the monitoring aspect a little bit further out thing. But,
Quantum was a
one,
great one to mention. I think
yeah.
that's going to be huge. It's like right now we just see these chandeliers coming out of IBM and Microsoft and the big players. And it looks like it's so far away, but that technology is going to be here quicker than we know it, and it's going to
Mhm.
be a paradigm shift in how we work.
Right, right. And yeah, in many aspects, I actually wrote an article just this Monday about, it's you can replace AI with other technology, but it's really that kind of a superpower that you get from human intelligence plus artificial intelligence. And I created an equation: HI plus AI is elevated collaborative intelligence, ECI, right? And so, and then as any business leader, or especially a data architect or a strategist, you then look at if ECI, that elevated, leveraging technology to be even better at things, what are the leading indicators, the factors, and how you can influence that? So we have an article in detail about this. I think it's going to be a topic that we'll double click on, maybe even write a book about. But
I think you should.
that's I think is something that a lot of companies are trying to figure out right now. How do you do AI for good, or leverage technology automation for good, and empower your people, right? We can't forget about that. So
Well, I just got
maybe
to tell you, I had seen your work on this, and I think it's really provocative and important. I think the us versus them, or human versus AI, is the wrong way to think about it. It's how we can augment the power of AI to make humans more effective in what we do, where we get to the limitless potential. So that the simple math formula you just kind of created and shared with industry, I think is exactly the way we need to be thinking about the space.
right, right. No, absolutely. And then even from a people and organizational perspective, I think there's some changes in how you enable the organization, and even maybe looking at developing a center of excellence for artificial intelligence, and maybe even a new role, a chief artificial intelligence officer. So we have some content
Heard it
for
here
that.
first, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess from coming back kind of to architecture, how can architecture really enable to future-proof organizations across industries? I think industries are different. I've worked in different industries, but there's always a common ground, right? And maybe that is kind of the last question of our usual thing, and then we have our rapid fire
I
round.
can't wait for the rapid fire. I'd say future proofing is an interesting question, right? I think that what we're really doing is we're aligning our momentum and our energy to the glide path of our vision. And we try to do it with our principles, right? To be flexible, to be secure, to be standardized, to be simple, but not simpler than we need to be, right? Just the absolute, as simple as possible, right? And a number of other things, right? Those are the kinds of things we put into both our roadmaps as well as our solution designs that intend to put us in a place where we're, I'll say, a future ready. I won't say future proof, because what I found is that you can't let perfection get in the way of progress. And there is always going to be a corner we have to cut and some technical debt we have to accept. And there's a real pragmatism that's super important in our field that says, okay, it's a game of inches generally. We're going to be moving this down this path. Can we shift the angle of the arc to go this way instead? Because this is where our vision is, and this is actually where we were moving, but now we're actually shifting away from that strategy. So to me, it's about the game of inches to raise the trajectory of our flight path towards our vision, but in a way that is paced to the urgency of the challenge. Yeah. If there's something that is critical for us to compete in the market, we might cut some more corners, we might accept some more technical debt, and we might drive more bandwidth and cost into something to be able to get to that peak faster. And if it's more of a gradual approach, maybe we don't need to burn all the ships or replace all the technology before we've fully depreciated it or had all of our license terms renewals, right? Maybe we do it at the pace of our renewing of software. So to me, that's kind of how we pace that in.
Mhm.
So it's again, it's future ready, and I
Right.
think that's a good goal to have as an architecture
No,
organization.
no, I definitely like that. And while you were talking, I came up with another question. I'm sorry, but
Great, let's do it. Let's do it.
and I think that's very relevant for organizations right now, where you have different modalities. You have kind of the traditional waterfall, you have the agile methodology, and I think what you were alleviating to is kind of that continuous improvement, more of an agile mindset. And so, how does architecture fit into the whole agile model? Do you have any recommendations?
I do, and the answer is to embrace agile.
Mhm,
If you're in an agile shop, actually, whatever shop you're in as architecture, embrace it. That
mhm,
is the way work is done in that organization. So if they're working agile, architecture needs to work agile. And the way we do that is the way every other group comes into agile. They're a part of the team, right?
mhm,
So you need people with the voice of architecture in each of those product teams playing the role of bridging between the domain of that product and the
mhm,
enterprise domain when there's overlap, right?
mhm,
So if your sprints are all happening in an existing architecture, it's the same as redecorating your kitchen. You just
mhm,
go ahead and pull all the tile down, put new tile up, and you don't need a heck of a lot of building review to do that, right?
mhm,
But if you're going to knock down your garage and add another stall, or you're going to expand your kitchen and or create an open concept with some walls and knock them over, that's when you want to get outside of your agile product team and
mhm.
get the enterprise view to understand if I knock this wall over, does my house fall over?
Right.
Um, and that is where you're always engaging with architecture providing value, which
Mhm,
is super important. Like modern architecture shops should be
mhm.
all carrot, right?
Yeah.
Little stick when we need it, but all carrot, right? So to me, that's the best way to do it is embedded folks engaging to the enterprise domain and then leveraging those connections to help build the collaboration needed to design that structure that we're going to need to knock that wall over or to
Mhm.
build the facade for the extra garage door with materials that we may not be able to buy anymore, right? How are we
Yeah.
going to jerry rig it a little to make it work? So I think it's about that driving collaboration in the moments that are needed and then trusting those teams to execute in their own domain when it's all contained in their space. Trust is what allows architecture to execute in any organization. And that trust comes from appreciation of the folks around you, supporting them in what they're trying to do with as little self interest as possible.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I definitely like your metaphor with the house, making sure that you don't knock over the whole house. And one thing that I was exploring in Bravo when we were working with lots of architecture teams was to establish more product line architects that are focused on the product, working with the product managers, right? And then, but then still not forgetting to not kick off over the walls of the whole house, right? Because we don't that's not in the best interest for anybody if the house collapses or is upside down, right? So that's a super interesting insight. So all right, well, I think it's time for a rapid fire round where we shoot some quick questions your way.
Let's
We're
do it.
looking for short, insightful answers. Grant, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What is the one technology that you cannot live without?
I'm going to get laughed at for this one. PowerPoint. It's the truth. It's the best way to convey ideas and get people together. So, a little low tech, but honestly, PowerPoint would be my
Right,
pick.
right. It's many cases because it's so visual. It's always good to just see things and keep it simple. But yeah, that makes sense. Uh, where do you go when you learn about new technologies and trends? How do you get that information? What's your recommendation for folks?
I'm talking to one of my key sources, right? CDO Times, and I'd say that that's a great source. If you're not clicking into that, do it. Carson's spending hours curating the internet for you. And also LinkedIn. I have to say, some people say LinkedIn's a bit of a mess and that their feed looks like X, Y, and Z. hit the little hamburger button and hit hide post on the things you don't like until the post is filled with beautiful insights that excite you. And that's exactly what I've done.
Mm.
So I have a LinkedIn feed full of amazing ideas. And I find myself scrolling in there at least a half hour a day to learn and to engage in some of that conversation.
Nice. Cloud or on-premise?
Cloud.
Why?
Because of the competitive advantage. It's not usually a competitive advantage to host. So if you can get commodity that will deliver what you need, and hosting is commodity, then that's what you should do. However, if for some reason you've created a competitive advantage in hosting, then do that. But that's very rare, and there's a lot of companies that are going to do it better than you, so take advantage of that.
Okay. Favorite architecture framework?
So I would say I really like the BizBock, which is the business architecture body of knowledge, because it pushes architecture out of that dark dungeon that we're usually pushed into the boardroom. And it helps us add the most value to the organization by applying the insights architecture can share to the planning and the strategy work before we get all the way down the road of, okay, we're kind of backed into a corner, we'll try to make it as best we can. So it's just where I think we can add the most value as architects.
Okay. If you could have dinner with any tech leader, dead or alive, who would it be?
Tim Berners-Lee. I think it would be fantastic to sit down with somebody who's had the span of impact to create the internet. I know it wasn't Al Gore, I'm sorry, I gotta say, but I think that what he's done in his lifetime in terms of the impact it's made on our society and on technology dwarfs anything anyone else has done, including AI. So I think while there's more that takes a village, it's not just Tim, but Tim was certainly one of the great minds that brought this environment together, and ultimately is one of the founders of the reason I have a career in this space. So that'd be a person I'd love to meet.
Yeah, and I think he's also working on the internet 2.0 or 3.0 right now, where it's actually more secure and your data is more secure. So that's definitely a topic that I'm also monitoring, looking to what he will come up with. So yeah, again, this was fascinating, Grant. Thank you for sharing. Your expertise and insights. I think we can clearly say that the synergy between enterprise architecture and digital transformation is indispensable for any organization that aspires to be future proof, or as I learned from you, future ready, because you want to be you can't be prepared for everything, but you have to have that agile flexibility built into your model. So any last things that you want to leave our audience with? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Go find me on LinkedIn, Grant Ecker. There aren't a lot of us out there with my name. At Danaher is where you can for sure find the right one. Follow the Chief Architect forum, follow CDO Times, and dig into Karsten's work. It's fantastic, and honestly, saves us all a bit of time because he's already curated it. So reach out, though. I do respond to messages, and I'm happy to connect, especially if you've listened this long. I mean, it's the least I can do is say hello.
Right. Again, thank you so much, Grant. So to our listeners, if you found this episode insightful, please do subscribe for more episodes and consider our unlimited access membership for CDO Times for content frameworks and training. This is Carsten Kraus signing off. Until next time, keep on innovating.